This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to a somber edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal back with you in the Brooklyn bunker for this December 8th edition, the 291st episode of this show. And not too many times I've come on here feeling as uncomfortable as I do right now based on the horrific scenes coming out of Southern California that we all witnessed via social media last night or from a closer perspective. Jonathan Kinchin and I spoke this morning, and we decided the right move was to do the show. We're going to start out. We're going to talk about what's going on for a few minutes, and then we're going to very awkwardly segue and do the show that we were planning on doing initially with the thought that maybe a little bit of distraction for racing fans isn't the worst idea right now. So with that in mind, I'll bring in this show's co-host. He's the people's champion. He's driving around in a car somewhere in Texas, I believe. He's Jonathan Kinchin. What's up, JK?
Oh, what's going on? No, I found a hotel lobby. My son's school had a little bit of a snow delay this morning. Us Texans don't know how to handle ourselves. So he went to school a little bit later, and I've had to find somewhere to park myself, but minimal problems compared to what else is going on.
That's for sure. That's for sure. I don't even want. I'm tempted to make a crack about it. At least you showed up at all this time, but it hardly seems appropriate during this piece of the show. So, JK, I learned what was going on last night from you. Actually, I'd seen the information and the terrifying images earlier in the day from around the Los Angeles area of how close fires were getting to the highway. It didn't occur to me. You said something, you used SLR abbreviation in the text you sent me, which I obviously knew meant San Luis Rey. And at first I was confused because I was like, wait a second, like where I was seeing before, that wasn't down in, I think San Luis Rey's in like very close to Oceanside. And I didn't realize anything was going on down there. Where did you first hear of this situation?
A group text between Scott Calder, our friend at Coolmore, and Jack Nelman, who is at Calumet Farm. He sent a message, pretty much the same thing that I said to you. Do you see what's going on at San Luis Rey? And I turned on social media, and it became pretty evident quickly what was going on. And so it took me probably about an hour until I made my way to Leo, I think his name is Leo Tapia's Facebook Live post that he put up, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, might as well dive in now. There is some terrific journalism on the subject. Steve Anderson with a story that's right at the top of the headlines on DRF.com right now. We're not journalists, nor do we pretend to be, and it's hard in the modern era where facts spread so fast and get sent out there via social media. I don't want to pretend to be some sort of expert arbiter that the comments we're going to make in this portion of today's show are going to be like adhering to journalistic standards. We kind of know what we see. And we definitely encourage folks to take a look at the real reporters and the hard work they're doing, especially Steve Anderson out there at San Luis Rey Downs today. But my main experience with what's going on out there is the Leo Tapia video, which now apparently is up to 6.4 million views on Facebook Live. JK, what does that number tell you?
Yeah, I think it's indicative of how much the world loves animals, right? I mean, there's not 6.4 million horse racing fans that are trying to see what's going on. I mean, I think it's a lot of people that have heard, that are seeing the heroic gesture that Leo made, and not just Leo, but others as well. In parts of that video, I think one of the parts that stands out to me the most was, I mean, he really started to struggle to breathe at some point, still trying to free these horses so that they weren't stuck trapped in barns while the fires were happening. So, I think it was a moment of heroism. Obviously, I think this is what probably drew people to the video. Also, just the sheer shock of seeing something like that. It was like a movie. It's like something you've never seen before. Just all these horses running wild and melee and like a scene out of like an Armageddon movie or something.
It's apocalyptic. It's positively
really weird.
It's positively apocalyptic. For those who haven't seen, definitely check it out. Basically, what you're going to see is Leo going into one of these barns that is. It's hard to tell if the barn itself is on fire, if it's like the palm trees overhead. But I mean, the fire is spreading, the smoke is thick, and he's going stall to stall, not only taking out the webbing, but then like pausing and trying to encourage the horses who are clearly terrified to get out there and join the herd. And it's wild to see the horses' instincts take over in the different directions that they send them in this fight or flight moment. And you see them sort of in real time, like creating this wild herd and running around San Luis Rey Downs. And my understanding was there were other, and again, this is where, this isn't journalism, this is speculation and things I've heard. There were other grooms and workers trying to basically like get them go into the right direction to safety, which was I guess the San Luis Rey Downs infield, where scores of horses ended up so they could be evacuated to Del Mar. Now, my understanding, obviously, this is something one would do as an absolute last chance, just letting horses out of a stall to run free. The plan A, I think when the fires were first, when the nearness of the fires became apparent, the idea was there was going to be the horses were left in their stalls and trucks were going to arrive and like transport them out. But the fire spread with such speed that plan A went out the window. And just in the way things happen sometimes when it's going down, the plan B of letting them run out, which is obviously incredibly dangerous, very easy for a horse to harm his or herself, or for a person to get killed by horses running around. But as an absolute last resort, this is what happened in Leo. I mean, it's just incredibly brave to see what he's doing on that video. And the plan, I guess, from what I understand it, is actually, JK, have you looked more recently than me? What is your sense of what's going on the ground down there right now?
I don't know. I mean, I've just been looking at Twitter to make sure there's no, just to kind of follow the big headlines. I would think, from what I understand, a lot of attention has been shifted towards Del Mar. I think, our friend and your friend before mine, Frank Scattoni, was tweeting. I think he was down there last night, and I would imagine he was there again today. Kind of helping people get signed up. They're looking for betting, and they're looking for anything that you can do, any equipment materials, or if you have any experience handling horses. I think they have an influx of horses at Del Mar, and they're trying to just kind of get them reset again. Obviously, that facility is actually pretty big, considering they have their state fair there and all that stuff. So it can kind of, I think this just kind of turns like a makeshift evacuee kind of situation. So I would think that most of the attention and most of the work that's being done at this point has probably been shifted down to there.
That sounds right. I just wasn't sure if there was any still, like, what the status of the full status of the fire even is on the San Luis Rey piece of it. I saw there was an estimate in the Anderson piece on DRF.com that something like 75% of the barns were gone. It sounded like there were obviously going to be equine fatalities, but it did also sound like a lot of the horses were in the process of being gathered up, I guess you'd say, and brought down to that facility at Del Mar, where over the next few hours and days, I would imagine the process will begin of trying to locate them. And your heart just goes out to all the people and all the horses involved. The sheer terror. And it's really an unimaginable. I would have said it was unimaginable if we didn't have the video right there showing showing the scene, but as much as we've seen a literal picture of it, it's very hard to get our heads around the emotional picture of what's going on in the hearts and minds of the humans and equines affected by this terrible tragedy. JK, it sounds like there are a few ways people can help. Del Mar might still be accepting volunteers. If I were a horse-loving person out there, probably not the worst. I mean, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but the thought of just like showing up and trying to see if there's anything you could do, particularly if you had experience with horses and could, get your hands dirty and do some of the work that's going to need doing down there. What about people who are farther away? Any thoughts on what they might do to help?
Yeah, Sophie Shore. We've actually plugged this organization a few times. The Nexus Racing Club. It's the club we've talked about with the younger demographic that's getting involved and understanding ownership and getting involved in the game. She was the co-founder, and she has I retweeted her, and then also I believe that you've tweeted about her as well. So if you wanted to donate, you could join me. I think they're up to $22,000 as of now, and they're trying. The goal they have is $50,000. So if you wanted to donate to that cause, there's an easy way to do it as well. If you're in the California area, I just saw on my Twitter feed that Nate Newby at Santa Anita Park is currently donation association. I don't know what Association Gate is, but if you have any idea where that is, if you're familiar with Santa Anita and getting down there isn't going to work for you today, I think that's another option.
JK, let me interrupt.
Nate, I'm sure to figure out.
Let me interrupt. Unfortunately, you've got a really dodgy connection there, and it's doing that like Skype thing where you speed up and cut out a bit. For one thing, if there's any way you can get in a better Wi-Fi situation, that would be great. But failing that, I just want you to underline, we didn't really get that last bit about what Nate Newby had said and how folks might be able to follow up in that regard.
Yeah, sorry. Hopefully I can try to find a better signal. The Association Gate, I'm assuming that is on the grounds at Santa Anita, but Nate Newby's putting together something there. So if you're in the LA area and that's going to be an easier situation for you than Del Mar, you might want to reach out to Nate Newby. He's on Twitter. And I think his email is pretty straightforward, Nate Newby or Nate.Newby at SantaAnitaPark.com. So maybe reach out to him as well.
Let me check that Nate Newby. Yes, it's Nate.Newby at SantaAnita.com if you're in the LA area and able to lend a hand. And yeah, if you want to find that tweet, as JK said, you can find it. It is in my timeline. It's in your timeline. It's in the @Nexus Racing Club Twitter feed. And Sophie Shore, who set it up, @Shore, SHORE _Sophie with an IE on Twitter. And that can lead you to this GoFundMe page. And you can probably search on there. The name of the item is Help for San Luis Rey Downs. And I will be contributing as soon as we get off the air today. I'm sure there are other charities looking to help out as well. We've had so many pleasant dealings with Nexus Racing Club lately that that's the one that we're mentioning. But feel free to do your due diligence and do your homework and find out another way to help. Obviously, it's like not even really too important to talk about the wider world of racing today, or even the narrow world in Southern California. But for folks who don't know, Los Al has canceled today. There are a couple of Grade 1 races scheduled tomorrow, and I don't know what they'll do. I would imagine they'll close ranks and talk with horsemen and come up with a plan that makes sense as to when's the right time to resume racing out there. JK, before we move on from this subject and awkwardly segue to the material that we'd originally planned to talk about on this podcast, was there any other thoughts you had about these events out in California at San Luis Rey Downs and beyond?
No, and I don't want to be too soapboxy, but I think that as many times as we look up and turn on the news and see all this negative stuff going on in the world, and with hate and all kinds of stuff, it's nice to see when people can kind of band together and do what's right and help people that are in need and animals that are in need. So as sad as it all can be, and as awful as it can be to see, there's a sense of inspiration that sometimes comes from situations like this when you see the kind of good in people, and it makes you realize that this world we live in isn't as bad as it always comes out to be.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, you can't help but be touched. At least I couldn't help but be touched watching that Leo Tapia video. And you got to know that he's not the only one out there. He is just the only one who was live streaming it. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of heroes, and obviously it's a little early to be talking about this, but we've already started to in a way on Twitter. Hopefully we'll see the work, the hard work that these men and women do to not only make their living through horse racing, but how horse racing is part of their lives, to the point where they're risking their lives like you would for family members, because that's how a lot of these people, especially a lot of the unsung heroes of the backstretch, that's what this means to them. You know, they're not doing it. It's a pretty good illustration that this isn't something being done for the money. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of love out there, and hopefully the rest of us can find a way towards showing love to them as well. All right, no easy way out of here, JK. I'm just going to say that in difficult times, it's sometimes nice to have distraction. We don't, I do an hour on this, but we don't, the guests we want to have to talk about it are all out there working hard. So that's not really appropriate. We don't have the knowledge to talk for another 45 minutes. So I think we should maybe just attempt to awkwardly segue to a regular, what you'd consider a regular show at this point. You okay with that?
Yeah, no, I think that, you said it well at the beginning and gave people a heads up that we were going to make the transition. So I don't think it'll come off as thoughtless. It's just, I think you said it best. We said what we can. We go the right direction to help. And obviously, we'll update any other happenings. I'll keep an eye on Twitter throughout the conversation just to make sure there's nothing else we don't need to add towards the end of the show that could help people help these horses and help these people affected by this.
I think that sounds good. All right, so little bit of a scheduling change on DRF TV today. Our normal lineup interrupted. Matt Bernier will be here for a few minutes after we're done for the DRF Bet spot play, but apparently he is feeling under the weather. I don't know if he's in the sound of my listening voice right now as we do this show live on Friday morning, but if he is, feel better, get well soon, Matt. We will be having an episode of Out of the Gate a little bit later, and JK, I couldn't accept the idea that you were the only one who got to be on Out of the Gate every week. I went up there to the DRF offices in New York. I walked into a meeting with all the muckety mucks. I took my hat off and I threw it down in the ring and I said, I want to be on Out of the Gate every week too. This is an outrage. Kinchin gets to have all the fun. And they said, Pete, all you had to do was ask. So there you go. Going to be doing a tournament talk segment weekly from now on Out of the Gate, and the first one debuts I think shortly after this program today. If you're watching live, we did get a shout out from Matt Bernier. He is home and he's feeling fluish. Get plenty of fluids, Matt. Come on, don't rest and fluids should bring you back. But definitely check out the Gate, my debut as a regular, and not just my debut, but the debut of the Lemmy.
Yeah, the funny thing about it is I actually called the same bigwigs that you did and said, hey, can we get Pete on Out of the Gate this week just so we can see the Fu Manchu, because it's the world needs to see it.
I'm pretty happy with it. I'm definitely going to be keeping it for longer than the appointed. I think you told me I only had to post a picture on Twitter and then do 3 days. I think I am going to go longer than that. And I went a little over the top with it. I let my stylist Bethany have a field day the other night. There was actually, as out there as the version that ended up on my face is, we did a rough draft that was actually taken from a picture of Lemmy, and that one I decided I couldn't do because there wouldn't be, with that version of this, there wouldn't be like one human being whom I would see who wouldn't just know immediately that I'd lost a bet. This version, I feel like 75% of the people I see are going to know that I've lost a bet, but like that other 25 are going to be like, hey, that dude, don't mess with him.
I don't know, man. You live in Brooklyn, like, and look, and I get mad when people throw hipster stones because I live in Austin, obviously, and I have the sleeve tattoo, so it's not often where people are accusing my city, my home city, the city that I've affectionately named my son after, they're throwing the hipster names at it. But Brooklyn, you can't really escape it. If Austin is a hipstery area, then Brooklyn is the originator. It's the British Empire, and we're Austin's America. So it started there. That's for sure.
The one thing I kind of forgot about that will be a little bit interesting is, I don't know if you know this, but Perrin is a December birthday. And so it's kind of a cool thing at her school. I imagine this goes away as the kids get older, but at this level, you basically do like one birthday party for all the kids born in the month. So it's a great way to just, the kids, from what I've seen, love having the parties together, and everybody gets to come out. It keeps from the phenomenon that I've heard of in some corners where it is a kid's birthday party, like, both days a weekend, basically for the entire school year. Gets to get you a little bit away from that. But sort of the downside for me, I'm going to be seeing literally every parent in Perrin's class with the full Lemmy tomorrow. How do you think that's going to go over, JK?
Like I said, it's Brooklyn. I don't think anyone's going to notice.
Not going to bat an eye. I was considering. I've never ridden a motorcycle in my life. I was considering borrowing one and just like having it parked outside. I thought it might help get the concept over. But yeah, it's a big month for holidays in our house. Obviously, we got the parent birthday festivities. We'll be doing sort of in a more adult themed open house holiday thing a little later in the month. Our great friend, Louise Leonard, who shares Perrin's birthday, which is December 18th, told me long ago, I was like, okay, so let's talk about the downsides of having your birthday so close to Christmas. And she said to me, like rule number one, no, like this is your gift for your birthday and Christmas. No, my birthday party turns into a Christmas party. So even though this other party will be like days from Christmas, it will not be a Christmas party. It will not be a Christmas open house. It will be a Perrin birthday open house. Yes, there will be some decorations strewn about, but make no mistake, Perrin's birthday. But we do also have, the Christmas holiday. We've got Hanukkah. We've got Kwanzaa, JK. We got lots of gift-giving occasions coming up in the month of December. And we've had a few questions from horse players about appropriate gifts. And we figured, even though it's on one level, it feels maybe it's a little early to be having this conversation. But then again, if we have it now on December 8th, maybe that gives folks a chance to amend their lists or think about things that they would want to be giving to other horse players in their life. There was a great one on Twitter. I gotta give credit where credit is due on this one. I'll find the name in a minute, but it was about a fella who, for his holiday gift, asked for a $5,000 voucher for the green room at Keeneland, and that one went over with his wife about as well as a fart in church.
Oh, I just keep thinking about the chart. Oh my gosh, that's good. That's definitely a good idea.
Talk about your thinking about gifts for horse players. What comes to mind for you?
Well, I tell you, one of the coolest gifts I got ever as a horse player gift was I got a book written by this guy with awful facial hair. Just called. It was called The Winning Contest Player. No, I'm dead serious. I did get that for Christmas one time.
You did?
I did, yeah, absolutely. And I got it. I got it for Christmas.
And you didn't know me at the time.
No, I didn't know you. This is way. I got it for Christmas. I started playing. So I got it for Christmas. I started playing that year, and that's the first year that I qualified for the Breeders' Cup betting challenge and for the NHC. So I really did. And then it came in a box with a black T-shirt with Zenyatta on it. And people that have been places with me where we travel, and it's my travel shirt I sleep in. Like, it's a black long sleeve shirt with a picture of Zenyatta on the front of it. So. That's always really good. Another great idea that we didn't even talk about people when we toss this idea around is if you go to the Breeders' Cup site, I believe you can get at least at some point or somewhere you can get the hats with the horses' names on them that were in the Breeders' Cup. So if you have a family member that had a score on that day, I had it'd be cool to grab one of those. I think I have a Bobby's Kitten Breeders' Cup hat from when he won down the hill. And so, if your uncle or your brother or your best friend or your dad or your mom or your sister or wife or whatever, scored out on I don't know, Wujita, you try to get the Wujita hat for them. It's something that I think a lot of people will cherish. So I think those are really good ideas. Gift ideas is
You're in sort of a we got most of that, but then we got most of that, but then we hit a dead zone at the end. But that is a great idea. I didn't realize those were commercially available. Breeders' Cup this year, in general, I'd say had a ton of impressive merchandise, including the multicolored, some might say Mets colored, though the blue was a little lighter. It was more of like an aqua and orange, maybe more Miami Dolphin colored Del Mar Breeders' Cup hat with the sort of beach scene that I saw Craig Bernick wearing, and immediately went and bought one for myself, and then felt awkward the rest of the weekend. Every time I'd see him from across the hall there at Del Mar, would quickly stuff the hat in my back pocket so we wouldn't know what a copycat I was. But there was a lot of really cool Del Mar merchandise, Breeders' Cup merchandise that I think you could probably find, heck, maybe even discounted for the holidays over on the Breeders' Cup website. And then we also had our friend, looping this back into the a little bit of the giving idea that we started the show with today, Jonathan, our friend who is doing the charity giveaway with the Breeders' Cup stuff. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, you know what, I think Dawn Mellon, I think is her last name.
Dawn. I caught Dawn. I didn't catch the last name.
Yeah, well, because I probably didn't throw it out there very hard because I didn't know. I can't remember. But she was doing a charity where she was collecting the hats and from people, because they give you like a box of 10 essentially. If you have a runner there, you get there to check in. They give you 10 hats that say Battle of Midway on them, 10 hats that say Lady Eli or whatever. And so she went around and was collecting hats to do auctions for, so that they could to go to charity. So I don't know if those auctions have ended yet, but that definitely would be one to look into.
All right, I feel bad we brought that up without being able to give the real info on it, but we'll take a look. And once again, our Twitter feeds, at Looms Boldly for me, at UT Big Hair for him. Let's remember to go ahead and send that around so folks have another option as far as that stuff goes. You gave me the gratuitous plug for the winning contest player. I'll save you the trouble from having to do two gratuitous plugs. Obviously, I think that this book. And again, I plug this book with such enthusiasm, not because I'm so desperate for cash that I'm out there by the walking through Prospect Park with a backpack trying to sell these things hand to hand, but simply because Mike Maloney gave so much of himself in the writing of Betting with an Edge, a professional horse player's life in thoroughbred racing, that I just want as many people to read it as possible. That one's available in the DRF store. If you have any trouble finding it, reach out to me on Twitter and I'll help you acquire one. But books are sort of a great gift for two reasons. Not only the content and the way that I believe that even a book with one or two good ideas in it is something that could really help you as a horse player. When you think about how your brain as a horse player develops over time and the way we have to constantly keep moving forward and incorporating new ideas to be successful. But then there's also the holiday period itself, where typically folks are going to have a little bit of off time anyway, and an opportunity to sit back and read and consume media. So I definitely think that's a good idea. Now, you're not allowed to mention any book that I worked on, JK, but what's another, if you were going to give a book gift-giving idea to somebody in the audience, what would you come up with?
Well, the ones we've talked about on the show a lot, the three that I think are very important for horse players, obviously Beyer on speed / picking winners. I mean, if you get an Andy Beyer book, you can't go wrong. Beyer on speed,
Yeah,
picking
I'd put
winners.
Winning Horse Player in there too. Winning Horse Player's also like very modern.
Okay. The other one is Steve Christ's Exotic Betting. I think it's one of the most underrated because it doesn't really focus on handicapping, but it focuses on a topic that we talk about on the show all the time, which is betting. And then the first book that I read was Steve Davidowitz's book, Betting Thoroughbreds in the 21st Century, which I think is remarkable as well.
Yeah, that really is among the gold standards. When I talk to people, newer players, about books they should check out, it's three that I always tell them. Davidowitz is always on the list. The Brad Free book, Handicapping 101, is on the list. And another one from just a couple of years ago, but the Jim Quinn book, The Complete Handicapper. That has a lot of great stuff in it. The other cool thing about The Complete Handicapper is that it has a lot of like short, digestible chapters. If you're the kind of player who's looking, sometimes I like to do this, take a break either at the end of a big meeting, or sometimes if I'm on a negative run, we'll take a few days or weeks even off and just sort of like chill and do a little bit of research and development. Maybe if I'm even spending time on racing, it's not handicapping these races I'm going to bet, but it's research and development. It's going through Formulator and trying to study something. And the kind of book that might give you ideas for those type of projects is a book like The Complete Handicapper by James Quinn. And you can also just use it kind of as a primer to reorient yourself with certain angles. I remember there's a piece in there about, I think there's a specific piece about claiming 3-year-olds and how betting claiming 3-year-olds is different than any other type of claiming race, even at the same level. And there's a lot of good information like that in there. And even professional players got something out of the book. Mike Maloney himself has a quote on the back cover there, and he talked about how much he enjoyed looking at Quinn's work. And again, even if some of it might be remedial to you in the sense of it's stuff that you already know pretty well, that you're going to be able to find some ideas. And that doesn't just go for the Quinn book. I think it goes for most handicapping books. So the DRF store has a variety of titles. If you haven't read my stuff, I mean, I'll tell you this. I've worked hard on it, and I've had good partners, whether it's Harvey Pack on May the Horse Be With You, or Frank Scottoni, who we mentioned before, who's out at Del Mar this morning trying to pitch in and help out with a book we did called 6 Secrets of Successful Bettors. That was my first racing book, and the really that was the first thing I did in racing before I ever even worked for the Saratoga Special. Frank and I we must have been brainstorming and about book ideas. He and I had written a couple of like pop culture books at that point about the 1980s. We did a book on 80s music, and we did a book on 80s movies. We were both working in book publishing at the time and spending every weekend at the track. The track was definitely our passion. We'd both fallen in love with Saratoga. And I think, we'd had a period of years there where we were kind of spinning our wheels as players after our auspicious start in a story that I've told on here before, I think many years ago at this point, when we went to the Belmont Stakes and ended up making a nice hit on a horse named Editor's Note. And we had the idea, man, when we can go to the track and walk out with $100 each when we don't know what we're doing, this game's going to be so easy when we finally figure it all out. And then, of course, it was, years of losing. And I think we got fed up with that. And we realized that we were going to have to do more and learn more if we were going to be able to be successful and be able to bet the races as often as we'd like in our lives. We had no disposable income. We were in our early 20s, editorial assistants eating ramen noodles every night, and not the fancy kind. And I remember being inspired. There's a book called, it's a famous business book that was like a bestseller for years called 7 Habits of Effective People or something like that by a guy named Stephen Covey. And I had the idea, or Frank and I had the idea, let's take that idea for horse racing. And the idea of the Covey book, basically interviewing all these successful people from all these walks of life and trying to figure out what they did that was the same. And that's what we did, not really knowing what we'd find. We set out, we interviewed professional horse players. They were both anonymous in the book. Maury Wolf comes in that book as the Maryland player, and Mike Maloney is the Kentucky player. But we also spoke to people like Paul Kornman, like Andy Serling, like Ernie Dahlman, like Barry Meadow, Andy Beyer, all these successful horse players, a lot of professional players mixed in, some other professional gamblers as well. And to our great pleasure, the conceit of the book worked. It fell neatly into the 6 different chapters. And it was Charlie Hayward and Steve Christ who we had the first conversation with at DRF, and they both had backgrounds in publishing. Steve primarily as an author, Charlie as a publisher, and they actually gave us money to essentially get our PhD in horse racing, and that's what that book was. And as part of writing that book, was able then to go up to Saratoga, hook on not only with the Saratoga Special. Frank and I were the original handicappers for that publication, but then also because I had the relationship with DRF at that point, and met Mandy Minger probably in that very first meeting, that very first day down at the old DRF offices way downtown, and she was helping produce the daily seminars from Ciro's that, of course, were hosted by Harvey Pack, frequent guests including Andy Serling, Jay Privman, Dave Grenig, a who's who of DRFers. Watch was on there a lot. And obviously that experience. And if you remember those shows, I could probably, you might have seen me even if you didn't know. The guy, if you're facing the stage, the guy all the way on the left, sitting on a stool with a headset, pointing at Harvey when the red light of the camera turned on, telling him it was time to get things going. That was me. And that was part of my education too, getting to listen to those people talk about racing and hearing all these different reasons why the lights on the tote board blink. And it was fun. So I'm very affectionate when I think back to that book, 6 Secrets of Successful Bettors, because as much as I often, and I think justifiably, give credit to my time at the Special for how I got in racing, if it wasn't for the support of Stephen Christ and Charlie Hayward and Mandy Minger with that book, 6 Secrets of Successful Bettor, and all the fantastic and hard work my partner on it, Frank Scatoni, did, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today, JK, all these years later. I didn't mean to tell a 10-minute story about 6 Secrets, but I realized I didn't think I'd ever told the story quite that way on the show.
We like stories, PTF, especially the behind the scenes of how things happen. It's always interesting.
Yeah, hopefully there's something to learn. That is a very frequently asked question. I'm sure you get it too, JK, and I'll let you tell me how you answer it. But folks are always asking, who are interested in getting involved in racing, what kinds of things they can do. And I'll tell you, honestly, my answer to them, one of my answers to them is, well, you're already doing it. You're networking. You found, not that I'm some, great, higher up in the game or whatever, but by talking to someone like me who knows a lot of people in the game, you're starting off in a position where, I'm often hearing, I'm not necessarily even doing the person who asked that question a favor. I have friends who work in media departments around the country or whatever who might be looking for people. You never know. But if you reach out and start building your portfolio of contacts, sometimes it might lead to something right away. Sometimes it might not lead to something for 5 years. But just by putting yourself out there, and I think that includes not just doing that socially at events like a EquestriaCon or a handicapping tournament, but it means putting your work out there as well and your ideas out there via social media. What is your answer to that? You must get asked that question all the time. And what do you tell people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is it's funny. I was listening to Andy Serling's podcast he does, and he had on Gabby Gaudet, and he kind of asked her the same question. They talked about it for a while as a young person getting into racing. And I think that the theme was, a lot of people will think it's the connections that you have that help. And that is true. Connections that you have help. But if you aren't in a position where you have those connections, then you need to go places and become connected. And go to racetracks, talk to people, email people and ask for opportunities to do stuff, work for free for a little while to get yourself involved, work on little projects, reach out on Twitter. A lot of people do that with us, ask questions and things like that. I think that things like EquestriaCon I think are great, for meeting other people that are involved in the sport and share the same interests as you are. Obviously, the handicapping tournaments is one where you're in a room full of people that care. So I think putting yourself out there is the biggest thing you can do. And not even just racing, right? I think in general, whatever it is you're interested in, if you're if you're a photographer, then you need to meet other photographers, or you need to meet people that need photographers, or meet people that deal with photography. So whatever it is, I think you just put yourself out there. You try to meet people, you try to learn, you understand that coming in at the entry level doing grunt work, although it might not seem like it's going to propel you to your dream, the connection that you'll make is more powerful than even sometimes the experience you'll gain from the action that you're doing. So I think the biggest thing is connecting with people and kind of putting yourself out there.
And it's a good point you make about, obviously it helps. I think about my first job in media, working for that book publisher, Simon & Schuster, where I met Frank all those years ago. It is true. My dad, who was obviously involved in media in New York, had written a book, put me in touch with an editor and, actually a publisher at the time, who then helped me to get the interview that led to my first job. At the same time, I'd already hustled my own internship at that point in publishing, where I was working actually better than for free. It was for course credit, at least, at NYU. So it's sort of those connections. I mean, I don't know. Is that an example of nepotism? I kind of is, but it's not one that I feel super guilty about or anything, because I put myself in the position to take advantage of the opportunity. And I think in racing, obviously, in many ways, it's a family business. I mean, we know people who, many of the people we know in racing have parents who were in racing, and that's cool. And obviously that's not going to help somebody from the outside looking in. But then we also know people like Grant Lagrange. Have you heard what Grant's up to this winter?
I know he's at Fairgrounds. I don't know exactly what his title is or what his workload is, but I know he is working at Fairgrounds. I do know that.
Yeah, I mean, and Grant's somebody who reached out to us a couple of years ago, and we met and came and visited us in Saratoga. Was able to finish up his coursework at school, and then it was kind of that exact situation I described when he was ready to join the workforce. I actually spoke to Jim Mulvihill at the NTRA, knowing he had worked at Fairgrounds extensively, and we were able to sort of send him on his way. And I'm sure it is the entriest of entry-level positions he's doing down there. But now at least he's in a position to deepen and make those connections. And I think there are opportunities, even if you didn't have, it's not a prerequisite. It helps to have family involved, but it's not a prerequisite if you're somebody who loves racing, is willing to work hard, and brings the right energy to the game. Let's get back to the central, what was meant to originally be the central question of this part of the show, JK. Gift ideas. What else you got for me for a horse player?
I think it's always cool to Muggs those two to if you live in Florida or you live in New York or you live in California, jump on your track's website and buy, maybe you guys you just kind of sit in the grandstand, buy a table for the big race day for your dad or for your uncle. So he's never been to a Santa Anita Derby before. Then buy tickets for the Santa Anita Derby and present that as hey, in March we're going to go to the Santa Anita Derby. I think that's something that's kind of cool too, to get out and get to the track and kind of have a special day surrounding one of their big events. I mean, if I'd even encourage you, if you want to really go for it, do a Kentucky Derby situation for your father that's never been, or your uncle that's never been, or your husband who's interested in going, or your wife who would like to go. I think that identifying a good racing opportunity would be fun as well for a good present.
I love that idea. And because, we all know traveling and racing, it can be hard to fit into our lives. But when you make it a thing, and it's a thing that somebody else is truly going to enjoy, it's not just a self-serving thing. It's got opportunities. I think I've told the story about how I'm planning. I haven't done anything about it yet, but I'm planning on going with my mom and with Perrin to the Derby this year. Susan and I used to go every year. We went from 98 through 2003, eventually giving it up, as I like to say, because it was the kind of vacation that you needed a vacation after. But and I've been back once since, but I'm extremely ready to go back. And my mom, whose dad was a brand manager for Seagram's, so he dealt with various, had various business interests in Kentucky. Four Roses was one of his brands. So he would go every year. So it was like this very romantic idea for her from the time she was a little girl. Hasn't gone. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I got to make that happen, because it's going to be so much fun. And I think that the traveling is a good idea. I guess we could plug the home team too, in terms of if you're looking for things, if you're somebody who is thinking about getting serious about note-taking, for example, trying to get somebody to buy you a formulator subscription to try to get used to that. Of course, JK and I are both huge Timeform US fans, so data is another piece of it that you could ask for or give potentially to the horse player in your life. This one's old school, but it could be amazing if you're the right person. If you're somebody who likes to watch races live, or has the opportunity to go and watch a lot of races live, a strong pair of binoculars, light binoculars with the right magnification, can really make huge difference. I know for me, you could trace the exact moment that I started watching races on TV, and because, well, in truth, the debut of the Paddock Bar was a piece of this, to have a place that comfortable and cool at Saratoga to hang out in. But I used to be a sit in the grandstand guy, and it was tough when you're working with these unwieldy things, and at a certain point in my life, that would have been a very much appreciated. In fact, I think my boss one year when I worked at Random House got me a good pair of bins, and that was a gift that kept giving for many, many years. You don't watch a lot of races live, do you, JK?
No, not really. I mean, we've been to the track together quite a bit. It's funny. It depends on where I'm at. At Saratoga, no, not really, because it's kind of a hassle to get to the front side where you can see. Now, we do have our secret spot at Saratoga we occasionally like to sneak to, and if you can watch a race from there, there's not too many better places in the world. But yeah, no, I don't. I've gotten to the track enough that I don't always watch live. However, I do make it a point. You've heard me say before, it's kind of silly. We've been here and we haven't seen a horse run live, so we should probably get out there and watch them. I try to watch it live if I can, but it really all depends.
I used to love
funny.
that.
Remember we had that thing when we were at Santa Anita. What we would do, 2-turn races we would watch from the Eddie Logan. 1-turn races we would watch from the front runner, which
makes perfect sense from a viewing point of view.
Yeah,
because at Logan, one of the reasons people don't love Logan is because it is past. Well, I think people don't love it in theory because it's situated so far into the turn, away from the finish line. Once you go, you get over that immediately. But it is true for viewing. What's special about that is that ability to see the first turn, and then you're kind of you're watching the finish on TV, whatever. Obviously, up above and front runner. Favorite place to watch a race in the world live, the roof at Saratoga, though, since the TV's gotten so serious, I feel a little bit like an interloper when I'm up there. Back in the day, JK, that was just a bunch of us press nerds standing up there watching and rooting, and it was absolutely the best place to watch a race. You see all kinds of, or at least for me, I'd see all kinds of trouble and things watching races through the binoculars there that I didn't see anywhere else.
Funny story about that is I was taking some people up there one time, and I got stopped by a security guard, and I panicked, and I said, Larry Colmus told me to come up here.
And, you rat!
And he said, okay, well, let's go talk to him then. And I was like, oh, no. And so he walks me over to where Larry is, and he goes inside, and he says, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Jonathan Kinchin." I made sure I said my full name, and I was like, "I've met Larry like 3 times with Travis Stone and Nick Tamero," and I'm like, and I see him around at racetracks. I'm like, "Please just tell me he remembers my name. Please tell me he remembers my name." And the guy came back and he goes, "Okay, you're good. Come on in." And I was like, "Oh, thank God, thank God."
It would have thrown you right out of. You would have been ruled off from Saratoga, and rightfully so, with that line of BS. But Larry's such a nice guy too. You're lucky. I mean, who knows how he phrased it? He probably let you off the hook there. Took some pity on you, JK. Did you end up watching a race in the booth?
Yes, we did. We watched a race. We watched a race with Larry, which is always fun. It's a really tough vantage point at Saratoga, but he's always very gracious about that. So it was fun to do. It's always fun to take people that have never done that before. What am I saying? The first time I ever did it was actually Larry at Gulfstream. I've since got to do it with Travis, obviously, a million times at Churchill. But then I've also gotten to do it with Frank Miramati when he was at San Anito, which was a blast. My dad came up and did it with Frank, and people that know Frank, he's obviously hilarious. He probably could have been a comedian. I probably would still consider him a comedian. So my dad loved that. So it's a really cool experience.
Looking forward to getting a chance to eat some pizza with Frank soon. That's for sure. You gave me another idea for a gift to throw out, talking about race callers. Now, I'm not sure if they're going to be doing it again this year, but wasn't there a special, it was either a special tour of the Racing Museum or of the plant at Saratoga with Tom Durkin that was happening last year? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know about that, but you did open up an idea that I do believe you could pay like $100 and go up and watch a race call with Larry. I think they donate the 100 to a charity. So that's another thing you could do if you know you're going to be at Saratoga with the uncle, the dad, the brother. Another great opportunity.
That is a cool idea. And check out the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame site to see if there's a interesting Tom Durkin opportunity. It might have a charitable component as well. I think they started doing that eyes in the booth thing back in Tom's era, and I think wisely have kept it going with Larry. The museum's another organization that deserves support. They do cool events. We've had some fun. Susan and I have watched a couple of derbies there, and definitely recommend supporting them. Membership there, going to an event there. There's so many fun things. Really, the only limit when it comes to this gift-giving stuff is your creativity. And I wanted to give a shout out to Damian Cioni, one of the handicapping Damians. This was not a holiday gift. What would be a good gift to ask for when you're turning 50? I asked for a $5,000 voucher from the OTB from wife. That was met with a big frown, he said. Got to give credit where credit is due rather than stealing Damian's fine work on Twitter. All right, I feel like we've covered this issue pretty well. We do have a couple of questions. Let's do a question. This was a very odd tweet that we received from Richard. I'm just going to read it, JK, and you're gonna react to it. He says, "I figured out why Arrogant lost the Classic and San Diego handicap. I think he should have been ridden close to the lead. Mike in those 2 races never put him in the race he sat as a closer. The best race for his style of running was in the Pegasus. Can you guys talk more about that possibility being the reason for him losing rather than not liking the Del Mar track surface, which seems false? What do you think?"
Well, I disagree and agree. And then what I disagree with, or I agree with, is that, I think Arrogant is probably better being ridden forwardly. However, I believe that he wasn't ridden forwardly and wasn't forwardly placed because there was something about that surface he just didn't agree with. Or something about him that
let's
just kind of gone astray.
I'll take door number 2. I'll fight you in a big way about the that it was just the surface. I mean,
but my point is that he didn't make the lead because he wasn't the Arrogate of old. That's
correct.
My point. Is
That's
or
what
whatever for whatever reason you want to go. I mean, or if it was the surface, which I know you disagree with. My point is that it wasn't the rider error that didn't find him on the lead. It was Arrogate that didn't find him on the lead. You know what I mean?
Correct. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. And I think that obviously Mike Smith's smart as he is and knows what he has underneath him. And I just feel like when you watch those races and he's not, I mean, he's really like, especially in the which one was it that I thought it was super noticeable that he was like barely taking the bit in? I think that was the Pac Classic, just sort of on and off the whole time. Yes. I mean, believe me, I'm not one of these guys. I'm not saying that the Del Mar surface was not a factor at all. Like, obviously, I think there's no way he liked it. But I think to say, oh, he was the same Arrogate, it was just the surface, or he was the same Arrogate, he just wasn't ridden right, those are both crazy to me. I think the reality is that it was like the Jonathan Shepard stick of butter argument, that like there's only so much horses have to give before they essentially become at best like over-the-top versions of themselves. You keep taking chunks of butter until there's no butter left. I think it's much more likely that after the 4 massive efforts, there was no butter left. And yeah, he could have probably been a better subpar version of himself on a different surface. But like, I can't go with the idea that, I mean, that was like, to me, a secondary factor over the primary factor of being over the top. And I don't think that Richard's comment is fair in that I think that he just didn't, he didn't have the push. He didn't have the push from the gate. And we've talked about that before. Horses losing their early speed, dirt horses whose early pace numbers are declining. That's bad, man. That's a sign of declining form. And I think that for me, is the crux of the biscuit when it comes to Arrogate's 2018 post-Dubai, 2017 post-Dubai. Anything else on that, JK, or should we shift focus?
Shift.
Let's shift. And again, we don't even know if these races are going to be happening, though again, perhaps with the idea of distraction and the fact that there are some grade 1 races scheduled at Los Alamitos on Saturday. Assuming these races are going to be happening, well, we can't assume that they are or they aren't, but there are PPs listed for them. And I know, JK, you took a look just in case anybody's playing this weekend. You did the work. What did you see when you looked at those PPs, and is there anything you have to offer to folks in the 3 minutes or so we have left on today's show?
Yeah, no, I usually try not to give away the out of the gate situation here, but to be honest, I didn't do too much digging. It's hard to look at PPs when you have what was going on last night in the background. So I had looked at 2 races at Los Al, the Grade 1 Futurity and the Grade 1 Starlet yesterday during the day. And so those are the 2 races that I figure we could talk about a little bit. I actually have some pretty strong opinions in there. We'll start with the Los Al Futurity, which is in race 3. The 2 Grade 1s are early. They're small fields, so they're in the pick 5. They're early in the day. I love McKenzie in this spot. The 5 horses drawn outside. Solomini's obviously going to take a lot of money from a figure standpoint. Also, the Breeders' Cup drop. The Breeders' Cup runner coming back here. It kind of has that effect like the Derby does. The Derby horses always get bet moving forward. The same with Breeders' Cup horses. McKenzie is a second-time starter for Bob Baffert. I heard a story. Apparently, one of Baffert's like really good friends, like lifelong friends. Who is no longer with us. This horse was named after him, and so anytime we joke about it in other scenarios about the naming situation. This obviously isn't a joking situation, but I think that the names can lead you to some really good horses. These guys want to name horses special names for good horses, and I think that this horse is special. Ran a 120 time form figure, first start going 7 furlongs. That's pretty impressive. Even if he was better than the rest of the field, he was good enough to keep running and to finish with a final time that warrants a 120 time form figure, which is notably faster than anything that Solomini has run. With that said, we've also talked about how the inside is not where you want to be at Los Al. This horse is drawn outside Mike Smith. I think that this horse is going to be a cinch in this spot. I think you could probably bet the exacta McKenzie Solomini pretty easily here, but I'm going to single him in the double. I'm going to look around in the pick 5 and see what else I like outside of this. Going on to race 4, which is the Grade 1 Starlet. I want War Heroine in this spot. It's the second time Peter Miller horse. The only issue here is, and just in light of what's gone on, this horse was at San Luis Rey. The horse
can't imagine the horse will be running, right?
And the other thing is the horse was in the Peter Miller barn, which I know was affected, so that definitely could influence what happens with this situation. I'll say that and just kind of leave it there. I do know that if this race runs, if this horse runs, I think the horse has a really good shot. But like I said, it's kind of a dicey situation. So if you wanted to pass, I definitely wouldn't blame you.
That feels like the right move. Move. There is an article. There's a Steve Anderson article about McKenzie that you can find from December 6th. Big, gangly, and full of potential. McKenzie's a fitting tribute. Your analysis of that race sounds really interesting. We'll have to see. We'll have to see if it goes forward. If it goes forward now, if it gets rescheduled, a lot of different options. We'll have to see. Just throw up our hands and we'll have to see. I think that's about it, JK. We did get the okay to run long. If we had anything else we wanted to talk about, just looping, since it came up organically anyway, we'll loop back to talk about San Luis Rey. I do believe that in the Leo Tapia video, is that not Peter Miller's barn that he's in?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe so.
Never mind then. It's so hard. There's so much information out there, and there's so many bigger things going on. But there's going to be a lot more knowledge soon. God bless everybody who's helping out, especially those grooms on the ground at San Luis Rey, Leo Tapia, and the rest. Really moving stuff. We're going to be following that story very closely, obviously. DRF.com, I'm going to be checking back on the hour pretty much to see what, if any, new information is there, as well as keeping abreast of what's going on social media. Hey, thanks for sticking with us today. Very, very difficult show to do. Thank you, JK, for making it happen. But really, thanks to the listeners. We'll get back. Hopefully, we'll have some good news to report the next time we're on air, and we'll be able to move forward and from what's obviously a terrible tragedy, and continue doing the things we do on the show. We understand it was awkward today. I hope nobody felt there was any disrespect with the fact that we tried to do some semblance of what our regular deal is on the show. Hopefully folks enjoyed it, and thank you for listening. In any case, feedback always welcome. Podcast at DRF.com. I want to thank producer Craig as well. Stay tuned here. We've got Matt Bernier coming up with a spot play, DRF Bet spot play. We've got Out of the Gate and my Lemmy facial hair situation coming up after that. We will be back on Tuesday. May you win all your photos.